Welcome back to Bonanza Disc Golf. Today we're going to be doing another bag it or bin it, where I take a look at a disc and see if you should bag it or bin it and put it in the trash. In your case, in my case, put it in the Bonanza bin so that people can win it off of me in Bonanza battles. And today we have the first Patreon sponsored video. If you didn't know yet, at the third tier of my Patreon, $20 per month, you're able to actually request whatever disc you want and I'll make a review of it. And so Keenan was the first one to do that. So we have the Prodigy F5, and I'm honestly never thrown anything Prodigy. But when I went to grab this disc, I was actually kind of surprised by the feel right off the bat. And I had heard this about Prodigy before, but right in here, there's kind of a weird lip that feels like I'm gonna rip my hand open on it. So I'm really hoping that I don't do that today. I don't necessarily like that, but the flight numbers on this guy are 7, 5, -2, 1. So I have some discs to compare it to. We're gonna play with just this disc over 6 holes, and if I can't beat par with it, as always with bag it or bin it, we're gonna give it away. And since this is a Patreon sponsored one, if I can't beat par, it's going straight to Keenan. We're at Hitzman Optimist Park in Pensacola, Florida, just by an airport. So if there are planes, it might get a little bit loud. It's honestly a pretty good starting hole because it's 270 feet straight that way. We could try a flip up straight through there to see if that -2 will flip it up for us right off the bat. And there's an anhyzer line on the outside that maybe we could throw a little bit less hyzer, maybe even flat, and let it finish. So I think I'm gonna throw that anhyzer line first. Try not to kick into the road on the first throw of the day. But then I might bring it back here to just see if we could flip it up through that little gap too. This, I really don't like that. And it's kind of, I think it's called flashing. There's some right here too. Maybe, I don't know, if you guys have tips to change that, that's legal, PDGA wise, please let me know. But I hope I don't hurt my hand. Oh, that is just straight. I expected that to turn a little bit more. And the disc that I've actually brought to kind of compare it to, one of them is the River, 7.7, -1.1. Now, I'm not throwing either of these super hard because it's only 270 feet. We do also have a tailwind, and that'll help to make things more stable. But I think even this disc, the River, even though it's a -1.1 instead of -2.1, I think it will actually turn more than that disc did. Yeah, big time. Totally missed the gap. But that Prodigy's way more stable. There's also one more disc there that I'm going to compare it to. But in case you didn't know how these challenges work, I have to use the F5 for everything up until I'm inside the circle, or feel like I can make a putt, and then I can use my putting putters. But I'm gonna go mark that shot, grab the disc, and try to just throw it up the gap then, because it seems to wanna go pretty straight. As with all disc golf discs, I'm sure that the plastic has something to do with how this flight is gonna be compared to the numbers. It's a 500 plastic, which feels kind of premium. Honestly, the look of it's relatively similar to the Meta plastic from Discmania, maybe a little less stiff. I honestly wonder if instead of just trying to take the hyzer gap on the backhand, since this wanted to fly straight, if the forehand would work, because it will flip up a little bit because the forehand will have more torque. This might be the shot. Yeah, that does not want to flip up. What the heck? All right, at least in that plastic, I'm calling those numbers a lie. So the interesting thing about flight numbers that I'm sure a lot of you guys know is they can just be super finicky based on the companies. What I would say is this feels like it can get pretty understable. Maybe not right off the box like it is now, but maybe if I throw it harder, which at a 7 speed, I was expecting if you throw it at what I typically would throw a 7 speed at, it'd react like a 7 speed like that River did, which, by the way, I didn't even pick up yet, it's right here. But it seems like even though the rim might be the width of a 7 speed, it might react more like a 9 speed. So honestly, I think at least in this plastic, I'm just gonna have to treat this like a straight flying disc instead of a slightly understable disc. Honestly, kind of trying to throw it in a little bit. Maybe should have parked it, but honestly, 20 feet should feel like parked every time. All right, gonna be honest, I don't think the River and the Maverick, which is the other disc that I brought to compare it to, we're gonna have to touch those again because this disc is not flying like the numbers would suggest. Even when I was collaborating with Swanky Disc Golf and we took a look at like the Leopard 3, which was also 7.5 -2.1, I'd say that this is even more stable than that, at least right now. But I think I would need to treat this more like an FD, honestly. 7.601 the FD is. This probably is more 7.501. But I think if I act like it's that, I'm gonna do that for the next couple holes and see if we can play well. Simple little forehand gap or backhand, but the forehand looks a little more inviting. I honestly think I can throw this flat and it won't even turn over because of how stable this disc is. Yeah. Wow, far, very far. Yeah, that's funky. One of the things that I've heard a decent bit is that Prodigy discs tend to sometimes like Innova discs a lot of times, or at least what they used to, is they like runs are super inconsistent. And so even though it might say it's 7.5 negative 2.1, you might have one that's 7.5 negative 3.0, one that's 7.4.0.1, which is pretty similar to what mine is, maybe a little more glide, maybe 7.5.0.1. I've heard that they fix that a lot with some of their newer molds, but since this is an F5 instead of like an FX3 or whatever, their naming system's weird too. I don't know, this is a very interesting disc. I don't not like it, except for the feel, because it feels stupid. This might be outside of putting range. But the flight of the disc is exactly like a disc that I would want in my bag. Just super straight with some fade at the end. And that means it'll probably beat in eventually to be 7.5 negative 2.1, but it's just not there right now. Oh, that skipped forever. All right, I honestly think the skip shot would have been more effective than actually just trying to run that with this disc. Little tailwind, gonna drop us. Not enough, apparently. Come on, buddy. Well, starting out, +1. Need 2 bogeys in order to not give this disc to Keenan. Not that I don't want to give it to you, Keenan, but it's nice to have extra discs to compare stuff to. All right, 4 holes left. I need at least 2 birdies. This one's 260 feet, OB along the fence. Pretty straight gap to throw through, and I normally would just throw a disc like this flat, but I think I'm gonna have to give it a little bit of turn because it's way more stable than the numbers would suggest. I think I've said that enough times. What I haven't said enough is to subscribe to the channel, please. And maybe the Patreon if you want to tell me what this to review and be my boss for a video. Skip. Oh yeah, that's pretty parked. I think that a little bit more. I gave it a little more snap, and that showed a little bit more the quote-unquote understability, but it still didn't turn. It just kind of held and then finished afterwards. So I would still say, I mean, maybe if you wanted to change the flight numbers from the river to that, where that might have like 7.5 negative 1.1, whereas the river is probably closer to 7.7, very glidey, negative 2 or 3.0. I would say that that could be pretty accurate, but hopefully we got to drop in here and we can get at least one more birdie. I think one thing this shows as well is the importance of trying discs instead of just trusting the flight numbers, especially from some manufacturers. So if you have a friend and you want a disc and they have it, try it out. Maybe watching videos like this hopefully will help. That's why I try to compare all my reviews to other discs. So if you've thrown that or seen it be thrown, you have a general idea of how something might fly. But just because a disc is different, I totally just slipped there, than its flight numbers doesn't mean it's a bad disc. Like, this is a pretty solid disc, as you can see, and it does fit in a slot that I really need in my bag, which is a very straight flying fairway that has a little bit of finish, because I maybe lost both of my Explorers that were in that zone. But it's nice to have something like this that will eventually turn into a pretty good turnover disc, and I would potentially think about putting in my bag if I kept doing well, but I hate the flashing. I just can't get over how it feels in my hand. 3 more holes, need at least 1 more birdie, otherwise I gotta give this to Keenan. I don't know why I'm being so mean to you, Keenan, but it's just staying with me. All right, hole 4. I mean, I think that this course is honestly lined up pretty perfectly for testing discs in general. Hole 4 is 275. And even though, one thing to know is I'm normally on these type of distances, almost all these holes would probably either throw a putter or a mid, but I know that a lot of people are throwing fairways at these distances, and it's not a bad shot, especially if you have a disc that at these speeds that I'm throwing it at on these distance holes, it's pretty workable. And I'm sure if I was to take it out and throw it on a 350-foot hole, it would have that more turn. But 7-speed tends to, I think, be around this distance. It's hard to say what 7-speed even means, but gotta miss a couple trees, take a birdie. There's the turn. It's kind of hard to say there's the turn when you throw it and shank it right. It did turn a little bit like I said it was going to, that -1, but I also shanked it very right. All right, got a little up and down here. Do have a little forehand. Probably the easiest shot to make. Hit and sit. Yeah, that has a lot more finish. Just gets kind of up there. I'll start with my river real fast. It just doesn't get on edge or turn as quickly, even the Maverick. It just has a much glidier finish to that one finish, whereas that one kind of had a pretty severe one to turn back to the right. So that's pretty interesting. And even if you look at the profiles, which I'll show you here in a second, the profiles of those discs are also pretty different. So for a 7-speed disc with -2 turn, which this has -1.5 and this has -1, if you look at the profile of the disc here, we can see that the parting line is pretty high. Oh, there's something flat on the next one. Let's not waste your time. So you have the bottom of the disc, and then you have kind of the wing of the disc, the bottom part of that. You might be able to see that on the river here, it's just a little bit lower than on the F5. Same thing here. So you see here as well, that the Maverick, this part right down here, this lip's edge, is lower than this. And the lower that is, typically the more understable. That's how you could tell that this, just out of the box, is gonna be more stable than what would be quote unquote a -1-1, even though it's a -2-1. Also, if you're wondering how like sometimes people just feel a disc and be like, that's understable, that's overstable, that's pretty much how people are able to tell. And that's why this one, I would have felt it like this pretty neutral. Like it's not unstable, because if you feel this, you feel like where you're holding it, your fingers are in contact with more of the rim, because the flatter it sits, the more unstable it's gonna be. So this one feels neutral because there's not as big of a gap as an overstable disc. So pretty neutral flyer. Not -2-1, but numbers don't really mean anything anyways. All right, so you might be able to see a guy in the middle there. He's basically where the basket is, 330 feet out, which this is perfect because in a tightly weighted shot like this, this is where I'd want to throw a fairway and a relatively neutral fairway. So we'll see if, as I'm powering up to my general fairway distance, if this thing acts more like its flight numbers or as I would expect. Yeah, way more stable. Holy cow. Also totally missed my line so badly. It's also not very glidey, maybe even four glide. Here's the river. I'm gonna actually try to hit my line this time. There we go. And that is what an understable fairway, go in. Oh my gosh, that almost went in. And here's the Maverick for another reference. It's much more similar to the Maverick than the River, but the Maverick definitely still is flippier. It also feels smaller diameter, even though they're all 7 speeds. The F5 is definitely the least glidey of the bunch, which isn't necessarily a bad thing because sometimes you want to be able to throw something hard and trust that it's not going to go past the basket. No, it's so low. Sit down. Buddy, make a freaking putt. There we go. You just got to tell yourself to make the putt and maybe you'll make it. All right, one more hole and I need a birdie because I'm at even par, otherwise this is going to Keenan. This is not good. The hole's there, 310 feet. Could be a forehand. I have to put on a lot of hyzer, get the height right and flip it up. But honestly, I think it's stable enough to do that. I just have to hit that gap on some hyzer flip up. There we go, there's a flip, missed the tree, no. Oh. It did flip up, but I will say, as we're coming up here, I mean, unless I skip this in, which is a possibility, I'm gonna have to say bin it. This is the first disc, I think. Like, there's been some that I haven't been enthused about, but they're not bad discs. I just really don't like this disc very much. I'm sure it can be good for some people, and I'm sure a lot of Prodigy players are cussing at me in the comments right now. And just like any disc, you're gonna have to build your own relationship to it, but some discs you just don't wanna build that relationship. And this is one of those for me. This would be so sick to end the video though. Oh no. Not enough hyzer. All right, Prodigy F5 for everybody in the world, except for Keenan, since I missed that skip shot. Bid it. That's my camera. No, it's not good. If you want to see the last bag or minute, I would highly recommend. It's with the Trash Panda Inner Core. Super cool new disc to come out of a new company. Finished +1 here. That's pretty embarrassing, but that's what happens when you're throwing a bad disc. That'll get a couple comments. No, you're just throwing it bad. Yeah, duh. But go ahead and watch the Inner Core review right over here. If you haven't picked up any of my first run stamped discs, please go and do that and support the channel. These are essentially my Tour Series discs. I'm just doing them myself to keep a little bit higher of the profit margin. So, see you guys in the next one.